The year is 1828. Picture this: a man stands at the edge of the known world, staring into the endless Australian wilderness. Behind him lies civilization. Ahead? Nothing but red earth, scorching heat, and mystery. Captain Charles Sturt doesn't know it yet, but he's about to solve one of geography's greatest puzzles, and nearly die doing it. Today we're diving into Sturt's death-defying journey into Australia's heart, witnessing Andrew Jackson's brutal rise to the American presidency, and watching as Russia and Turkey clash in a war that will reshape the Eastern question forever. Oh, and we'll see how a small South American country called Uruguay comes to exist, all in 1828. This is a world still finding its boundaries. In Europe, the old order creaks under pressure. In America, democracy takes a darker turn. And in the far corners of the earth, explorers push into lands that exist only as blank spaces on maps. Let's start in Australia, where one of the continent's greatest mysteries was driving colonial officials absolutely mad. Where did the rivers go? Think about it: you're a British colonial administrator in New South Wales, and every river you follow seems to just disappear. The Lachlan River, the Macquarie River, they all flow inland, away from the coast, then vanish into swampland. Surely they must feed into some massive inland sea? Or perhaps flow into a great river system leading to the northern coast. Enter Captain Charles Sturt, a 33-year-old British officer with nerves of steel and an unquenchable curiosity. In November, he set out from Sydney with a small party to solve this riddle once and for all. What Sturt discovered was extraordinary. Following the Macquarie River downstream, he found it didn't disappear at all. It joined a much larger river flowing northwest. He'd found the Darling River, one of Australia's great waterways. But this only deepened the mystery. Where was all this water going? The answer would have to wait. Sturt's men were exhausted, their supplies running low. They turned back, but not before Sturt made a promise: he would return to follow this great river system to its end, no matter where it led. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, American democracy was getting its first taste of truly nasty politics. The presidential election was reaching its climax, and it was getting personal. Viciously personal. Andrew Jackson, old Hickory himself, was out for blood. For years earlier, he'd won more popular votes than John Quincy Adams but lost the presidency in the House of Representatives. Jackson supporters cried corruption, calling it the corrupt bargain. Now Jackson was back, and this campaign would be unlike anything America had ever seen. The mudslinging was spectacular. Adamsy supporters called Jackson a murderer, pointing to his numerous duels and his controversial executions during the War of 1812. They attacked his marriage to Rachel, claiming she was a bigamist. Jackson's camp fired back, calling Adams an aristocratic elitist who'd wasted taxpayer money on gambling furniture, a billiard table, for the White House. But here's what made this election truly revolutionary: Jackson supporters organized like never before. They created campaign songs, held massive rallies, and used newspapers to spread their message to ordinary voters. They were inventing modern political campaigning. When the votes were counted in December, it was a landslide. Jackson won 178 electoral votes to Adams's 83. The frontier general had crushed the Harvard-educated intellectual. But victory came at a terrible cost. Rachel Jackson, devastated by the vicious attacks on her character, suffered a heart attack and died just weeks after the election. Jackson would never forgive his enemies for what he saw as their role in his wife's death. And America? America was about to discover what happened when you put a man consumed by vengeance in the White House. But let's turn our attention eastward, where the sick man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire, was about to get sicker. Russia's Tsar Nicholas I had been watching the Greek War of Independence with growing interest. Not because he particularly cared about Greek freedom, mind you, but because he saw an opportunity to advance Russian interests at Ottoman expense. In April, Russia delivered an ultimatum to Sultan Mahmud to accept Russian demands regarding the autonomy of Serbia and the rights of Russian merchants, or face the consequences. The Sultan, perhaps unwisely, chose defiance. On April 26, Russian armies crossed the Pruth River into the Ottoman principalities of Moldavia and Wallachia, modern-day Romania. The Russo-Turkish War had begun. What followed was a masterclass in how not to conduct a military campaign. The Russians, despite their numerical superiority, found themselves bogged down by disease, poor logistics, and surprisingly effective Ottoman resistance. The siege of Varna became a nightmare for the Russians. Disease swept through their camps. Supply lines stretched impossibly thin. And the Ottomans, fighting for their empire's survival, proved far more resilient than anyone expected. But perhaps the war's most significant impact wasn't on the battlefield at all. European powers watched nervously as Russian influence crept closer to Constantinople. The French and British began to worry, if Russia carved up the Ottoman Empire, would it upset the delicate balance of power that had kept Europe peaceful since Waterloo? This war wouldn't end quickly. And its consequences would echo through European diplomacy for decades to come. Speaking of consequences, let's travel to South America, where a tiny country was about to be born from the ambitions of two much larger neighbors. The Banda Oriental, a slice of territory on the eastern bank of the Rio de la Plata, had been a bone of contention between Argentina and Brazil for years. Both wanted it. Neither was willing to back down. And their conflict was threatening to drag the entire region into war. Enter Lord Ponsonby, British mediator extraordinaire. Britain had significant commercial interests in the region and absolutely no desire to see trade disrupted by warfare. Ponsonby's solution was elegantly simple: if both countries wanted this territory so badly, why not give it to neither? On August 27, Argentina and Brazil signed the Treaty of Montevideo, creating the Oriental Republic of Uruguay as an independent buffer state. It was a diplomatic masterstroke. Uruguay got its independence, Argentina and Brazil avoided a potentially devastating war, and British trade routes remained secure. But here's the fascinating part: Uruguay's independence wasn't really about Uruguayan nationalism, at least not primarily. It was about great power politics and commercial interests. The Uruguayans themselves had relatively little say in the matter. They were simply fortunate that their independence served everyone else's interests. So there you have it, 1828, a year when mysteries were solved, democracies turned nasty, empires clashed, and nations were born from diplomatic convenience. Charles Sturt was still puzzling over Australia's rivers, Andrew Jackson was preparing for a presidency fueled by vengeance, Russian and Ottoman armies were dying in Balkan mud, and Uruguay was taking its first uncertain steps as an independent nation. But Sturt's greatest discovery still lay ahead. Jackson's presidency would prove even more controversial than his election. The Russo-Turkish War would drag on, drawing in other powers. And Uruguay? Well, let's just say being a buffer state between two ambitious neighbors was never going to be easy. Next time, we'll see how these stories unfold, as 1829 brings revolution to London, revelation in Australia, and the rise of the most powerful American president the world had ever seen. And so concludes our journey through 1828. Join us next time as we explore what the year 1829 has in store.